When researchers map human ideology, they typically rely on surveys and stated preferences. But talk is notoriously cheap, and the resulting data is highly unstable. The moment a person answers a pollster's question, their response is immediately contaminated by social desirability bias. They unconsciously adjust their answers to avoid looking foolish, ungrateful, or radical to the people around them. On top of that, researchers have to contend with instrumental motives. People will frequently express a specific political view not because they actually believe it, but because they are trying to influence an electoral outcome or secure a policy change that benefits them directly. To solve this problem, economists mapped political behavior onto a formal utility function. Any political action is the sum of instrumental gains, social rewards, and intrinsic utility. That intrinsic variable is pure ideology, a deeply held belief existing independently of peer pressure or financial consequences. The experimental challenge is clear. To isolate and measure an individual's actual ideology, researchers have to construct a scenario where the instrumental and social variables are driven exactly to zero. Surveys cannot accomplish this. The only way to solve the equation is through revealed preference, forcing subjects to incur a tangible, private financial cost to express their convictions. In 2013, a team of economists traveled to Pakistan to measure intrinsically motivated anti-Americanism, a complex ideological stance in a geopolitically critical region. They recruited over 1,000 young men, specifically targeting urban centers with large migrant populations from conflict-affected regions like Fatah and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The subjects were brought into a controlled lab environment and given a standard, entirely non-political, Big Five personality survey. After finishing the test, subjects were instructed to open an envelope containing an unexpected offer. For simply completing the survey, they were guaranteed a bonus payment representing a significant fraction of a day's wage. There was one mechanical catch. To collect the money, the subject had to explicitly check a box on a form that read, "I gratefully thank the funding agency for its generosity." For half of the subjects in the room, the form explicitly stated that the bonus funds were provided by the United States government. This mechanism engineers a direct collision between financial gain and ideological expression. Securing the cash forces the subject to formally violate an anti-American stance. The researchers mapped this exact decision onto their theoretical inequality. A subject will reject the money only if their intrinsic ideology, combined with any general aversion to taking cash, outweighs the financial cost, the instrumental utility, and the social pressure. The experimental design drives the instrumental utility to zero. Checking a box in an anonymous Pakistani lab has absolutely no consequential impact on actual U.S. foreign policy. Next, by having subjects submit their choices in sealed envelopes, the researchers guaranteed total anonymity from peers, eliminating the social variable from the calculation. That leaves the financial cost. The baseline bonus offer was set at 100 Pakistani rupees, which equated to roughly 1/5 of a manual worker's daily wage. Operating in total privacy, 25.2% of the subjects willingly forfeited the 100 rupees, rather than check a box thanking the U.S. government. Because the design stripped away social pressure and real-world consequences, this failure rate exposes a pure, revealed preference. 1/4 of the room decided their ideology was worth more than the cash on the table. It is possible, however, that these subjects weren't actually anti-American. They might have simply felt uncomfortable accepting extra money, or wanted to avoid feeling indebted to any external authority. To account for this general aversion to payment, the researchers ran a control group. Half the room was offered the exact same 100 rupee bonus, but the form listed a neutral local institution, the Lahore University of Management Sciences, as the funder. This side-by-side bar chart compares the two outcomes. While 1/4 of subjects rejected the U.S. money, only 8.4% refused the payment when it came from the local university. By differencing out the local baseline from the U.S. baseline, the researchers mathematically scrubbed the general aversion variable from the equation entirely. We are left with an isolated, quantifiable metric. At a strict minimum, 16.8% of the men in the sample held an anti-American ideology strong enough to willingly absorb a private financial penalty. The researchers then tested the structural limits of this ideology by manipulating the price. They needed to know if political conviction is an absolute trait, or if it behaves like a standard economic good. A subset of participants were assigned a high-cost treatment. Instead of 100 rupees, they were offered 500 rupees. equivalent to a full day's wage, to check the box thanking the U.S. government. This line graph maps the rejection rate against the monetary offer. When the price of ideological expression jumped to 500 rupees, the rejection of the U.S. offer plummeted from 25.2% down to just 9.7%. When differenced against the high-cost control group, the pure ideological rejection rate drops by 12.7 percentage points. Economists use this exact price variation to calculate a theoretical absolute. Is expressing anti-Americanism carried a price tag of exactly 0 rupees. They projected the baseline rejection rate would sit near 30%. Ideology possesses a measurable elasticity. Even highly potent political convictions have a strict breaking point when the private financial cost gets high enough. The final variable in the researchers' matrix was the social cost. They needed to determine how the data changes when the social variable is forcefully injected back into the equation. In a new treatment condition, subjects were explicitly warned that their decision to accept or reject the U.S. money would be publicly observed by the other men in the room. The conventional assumption is that public visibility accelerates radicalization. If a population harbors extreme views, the pressure of public signaling should force moderates to adopt the hardline anti-American stance to save face among their peers. This distribution model maps perceived peer behavior against actual behavior. When the 100 rupee offer was made public, the rejection rate did not spike. It fell by nearly 10 percentage points compared to the private condition. Follow-up data revealed the mechanics behind this drop. The actively anti-American subjects accurately perceived that they were in the minority. Rather than pressure others, they suppressed their own ideology to conform to the moderate majority, acting as if they had incurred a 211 rupee financial penalty. Making political choices visible does not inherently radicalize a group. In environments where the silent majority is moderate, social friction functions as a heavy dampener on ideological extremism. Controlled lab environments provide precise data, but behavior in isolated rooms often fails to map onto the messy reality of everyday life. 2 years later, the researchers launched a second experiment. In the lead-up to the 2015 local elections, they deployed field teams to survey nearly 2,000 households across the neighborhoods of Lahore. They moved the test out of the lab and onto door-to-door tablet surveys. To guarantee subjects felt completely secure against social pressure from the enumerators, they masked the U.S. bonus offer inside a randomized lottery payout system. Using entirely different demographics and survey technology, the baseline private rejection rate for the 100 rupee U.S. offer hit 34. Measurement was not an artifact of a sterile environment. It successfully tracked a persistent baseline political reality directly in the field. The final methodological hurdle is linking this highly controlled economic test to consequential political organization. Refusing a small monetary payment only matters if it correlates with actual behavior. The electoral landscape in Lahore was dominated by the rapid rise of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI party, which campaigned on a platform sharply critical of U.S. regional policy and the war on terror. When the researchers matched the experimental data to the doorstep polling, they found a direct correlation. Subjects who forfeited the U.S. cash in the private exercise were significantly more likely to be actual members of the PTI party. The utility equation holds up to empirical scrutiny. Intrinsic ideology is a measurable, predictive force capable of charting political party membership without relying on cheap survey answers. But the data also enforces a rigid economic caveat. While intrinsic ideology is powerful, it is highly elastic, tightly governed by immediate financial costs and the desire for social conformity. Policies attempting to alter political behavior cannot rely on standard polling or simple financial incentives alone. To actually shift outcomes, policymakers must accurately price the underlying intrinsic motivation, because